Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. And on this particular video, I'm going to be talking about a period from the 18th of January through to the end of January, perhaps one of the most important periods of 2026. And in fact, we've got a lot of important periods this year. And I can almost hear you saying to me, well, what could be more than we've already had? Because really, since Christmas, it's been one event after another, whether it's things to do with nature and accidents, whether it's things to do with outrageous actions by governments, rioting, protests, all of it. That's how it's been since the year began. So how can this part of the year be even more than what we've had? Well, it promises to be even more. And although I'm just going to take you through this period from the 18th through to the 31st of January, the full moon occurs on the 1st of February. So I'll be looking at that as well. There'll be another video out on that. I'm also going to be looking at what's going on from 12 perspectives, because I realize I haven't sort of looked at that kind of thing and so many of you really love the kind of sun sign stuff. So I'm making an accommodation and having a look at some of these very important alignments from your perspective and see how they react with the signs. So that will come in the second half. But the first half, I want to get into the nitty-gritty of why this is such an important period. And I think, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start with a picture. So here is the picture that I think most clearly shows you why all astrologers are looking at this second half of January and thinking, whatever next? And it's because we've got all these planets in a lineup here. And they include the personal planets. And by the personal planets, I mean the sun and moon as well. Although the sun is our star and the moon is a satellite of Earth, when it comes to breaking down the astrology, we always call them, we're not calling them the lights, then we call them or include them in the personal planets. So it's the personal planets that really directly relate to us. We resonate with their characteristics. They represent aspects of our life that we are familiar with. By the time we get to Jupiter and Saturn, the interpersonal planets, if you like, then we're getting slightly more removed and we're thinking about big things to do with the rule of law and government and finance and money, in big terms. And then when we get beyond that, and we're in the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, we're really in this whole very rarefied area of experience, very spiritual. These are the realms that we aren't familiar with on a day-to-day level, and we are brought to the understanding of them through the agency of the personal planets when those personal planets make aspects to them. So when we've got all the personal planets in this lineup, and as we go if we look at the point of view from Mars here, which is in the 3 o'clock position, and we go backwards to the 1 o'clock position where Neptune is, all those planets, are following on one from the other. And in fact, they're going to do that throughout the whole period of January and through to February as well. And in February, we get not only a solar eclipse, but the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And if we look at this chart and we see Saturn and Neptune in what looks like a 1 o'clock position, we see that they're very close. Saturn is 27 degrees 36 and Neptune is 29 degrees 51. So they are, and they have been really closely linked for many, many months, and they're drawing towards their conclusion because it's such an important and impressive cycle, the Saturn-Neptune cycle. It's part of the reason so many things are coming to a head, and we're seeing so many statements really about dissatisfaction. It's the feeling of disappointment and disillusion, which Neptune represents, and the hard pressure of reality and the forces against that dream or those desires and ideals that's pressing in and causing, well, it doesn't cause it, but it's mirroring, if you like, or reflecting all these protests that we've got all over the world. I mean, they're everywhere in streets and cities, from one country to another. And of course, because a lot of the focus is on the United States and the Trump administration, we do see a lot more about, what's taking place there in Venezuela and, all of that stuff that's been going on since the beginning of the year. And what I want to say about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, just because it isn't exact, and it won't be exact until the 20th, doesn't mean it isn't having an effect. And it's this effect, which I often talked about, it brings to an end a kind of idealistic structure or something that's had a lot of mystique about it, something that has kept us, our vision of how life should be, if you like. With Saturn and Neptune coming together, it's like the end of that, the end of that dream. We can't have that dream anymore. We have to have another one. And when we look back and we think about the Berlin Wall coming down in 1989 and the breakup of the Soviet Union thereafter, we sort of see that idea that was the end of an ideal and the end of a whole regime, and a new era begins thereafter. So this is the reference point that we're having again, and we're seeing it in process right now. But there's another very, very important cycle that I need to talk about a bit, and that is the Saturn-Uranus cycle. Now, when Saturn and Uranus come together in a conjunction, they begin a new Saturn-Uranus cycle, and it takes about 45 years for that cycle to be complete. And we will come to the end of a cycle which began in 1988 in 2032. And where we have arrived at is the last kind of what we might call major aspect between Saturn and Uranus. Remember, as they begin their cycle, they will sextile each other, square each other, oppose, quincunx, they'll do all these various aspects. And so now what's happening is that they are in sextile, and they just happen to be exactly in sextile on the 20th of January. And on the 20th of January, there is a Venus-Pluto conjunction. The moon is in Aquarius, Mercury is Aquarius, Sun is in Aquarius, and it is the beginning of this whole rock and roll period. So when we think about Uranus and Neptune, and let's go back to 1988, 1989. I remember I've already talked about 1989 or the Berlin Wall coming down. And that is because the last Uranus-Saturn conjunction was quite close to Neptune. So we had almost 3 in a row at a time. And again, we get great shifts when Uranus and Saturn are conjunct, and also when they face each other, they square off from each other, or they form connections with each other as they journey through the zodiac. So we get the idea of shifts in landlocked situations, and we get a lot of things to do with technology now, because Uranus is a planet of technology. So I think it's very interesting. I think one of the things I look back on, the Saturn-Uranus conjunction in 1988, I think that is where we had the first computer virus. And I think it was called the Morris worm, something like that. And so, we can see with Uranus and Saturn, we've got problems with technology. But at the same time, we've got the structure of technology being very, very important. We see a lot of big space events, things to do with space travel, to do with Saturn and Uranus, real breakthroughs. So we've got the Saturn-Uranus sextile, and if my memory serves me well, there is shortly going to be a rocket taking off, and it's going to take men and a woman, I think a couple of women, around the moon. And this is going to happen around this time that we're heading into, maybe just at the turn of February. I'm not 100% sure. or it could be late January, but it's still in this Uranus-Saturn mix. So as I said, it's not just the Saturn and Neptune conjunction. It's not just the fact that all the personal planets are going to be going over Pluto, but it's also, we've got the Saturn-Neptune sextile. So we've got a lot of really, really important planetary themes all playing at the same time. And one of the things I talked about on my 2026 video was this idea that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are in this triad form. So you've got Pluto sextile, Neptune sextile, Uranus, and a trine, a little mini trine, really holding them all together. And the last time that happened was in the war years, 1941 to 1945, I think. So we have a kickback to that period. I mean, they're in different signs, but the same signs. In other words, we're still, well, not the same signs, but they're the same distance apart in different signs, although Uranus is in Gemini again. So the fact that we've got this reference to that period takes us back to what was happening in those years. And what we are seeing now is a direct reflection of that, because it isn't just that, Trump invaded Venezuela, or probably wouldn't want to call it that, but he rescued the Venezuelans from an evil dictator. Okay, so that's that part. And then we look at what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, and then we think about what's going on in Iran. And as I speak, there are rallying cries for the United States to come in and rescue the civilians there, which means messing with Iranian regime one way or another. So, we look at all these things and we think, over there, that's happening. Over here, that's happening. But all together, this is making a mighty sound. And this is exactly what happened, certainly before World War I. And I'm not trying to say we're going into World War II. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we've got a resonance with that period, which is why nation is fighting nation and why there's a lot of instability going on in the world. And we're in that field of reference. But yes, do not think that this is World War III beginning. I want to make that absolutely clear. It's not a very nice period, and it is kind of scary. And we do have to watch very carefully what's unfolding. But there is always this possibility, and let's go back to the last Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the November of 1989. I mean, that gave birth to an absolutely wonderful new era. And that's always possible, just because it can't hold firm for the rest of it, and everything else starts to fall apart over the process of 37 years or however long it's been. C'est la vie. But, there is always the promise that the best of these influences is going to work out for the best and in the way that we're going to appreciate and find welcome. And I know also that a lot of people talk about this raising of consciousness and energy levels changing. And that may be, but I think the other thing that we look to here is the idea always of our awareness of things. I mean, this is how we have evolved since man first decided that he could make a wheel. We've got a long way from there, but in a comparatively short space of time. And of course, as you make those leaps of awareness into, hey, we can do this, awareness, i.e. consciousness, also expands to consider, oh, what can we do next? What do we know now that we didn't know before? So there is that sense that we are learning things and getting to see things that we haven't seen before. And that's all going to filter through and change our perception of things and our way of being as well. So there are all those things to consider. We can take astrology at any level we like to take it. We can look at it for finance. We can look at it for health. That's not particularly my area of expertise. We can look at it for therapy, psychology. We can look at it on that level. We can look at it on a mundane level, where we're looking at countries and politics. And we can look at it and see at a very spiritual level what the story is of the astrology. So it's a multi-layered thing. Doesn't mean any one is necessarily more important than another, or that you can necessarily exclude one out of all of them. But we do need to remember that the astrology is a set of symbols, it's a set of resonances, however you want to look at it, is going to really address itself to a variety of things. You know, it's not just one thing. So let me now show you another picture. We can see where all these planets are clustered now. And let me show you another picture of it. And this is from the perspective of the new moon in Capricorn. Now, the new moon in Capricorn takes place on the 18th of January. And I've got it here because we seem to be able to see it a little bit better from the perspective of London. Now, it's very interesting, these new moon, full moon charts, because in a way you say, or might say, they're a bit spurious. You know, you've just set it from one country, and obviously you can set it from different time zones, and you'll get these planets, and, you know, they will shift into different houses depending on the time of day that the full moon happens in your part of the world. So these planets, as you can see them here, a little bit more spread out in this particular chart. They will be in different places depending on where you were born. So I set this from London, which means we're looking at Great Britain here. And although you can't say, oh, this is a chart that's going to tell you what's going to happen on the new moon, the most recent full moon, which was on January the 3rd, was a very interesting full moon. It took place at 13 degrees of Capricorn Cancer. And in fact, 13 degrees of Cancer is the United States sun. And actually, it's also Venezuela's sun. And it was very interesting that the time that that full moon took place, from an American perspective, we had the ascending sign, I think, of Venezuela rising. There was a lot of detail about Venezuela and America in that horoscope. But of course, that's the wisdom of hindsight, isn't it? We couldn't necessarily say right from the get-go, oh, this is the moment that the US is going to attack Venezuela and take out and remove to New York the President Maduro and his wife. But on reflection, it's very clear. So here in this chart for London, we can see that the cluster of planets in Capricorn and Aquarius in the 5th solar house, and Uranus is on the midheaven. And maybe we will get a surprise announcement from the British government on the 18th of January. It's a Sunday, so that's very unlikely. But around that time, and looking at the picture of the new moon, we could say, oh, look, this looks as though this new moon will bring in some very unexpected developments, and perhaps some, we might even say, some developments to do with war and with an attack of some description. And the reason I'm saying that is that Mars, at the time of the full moon, is trining Uranus. And of course, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, that little triad there, that you can see they're all kind of grouped together here. And the significance that I would see here, if we just take a blanket look, because we're looking at it from the perspective of London, we might say that there are yet further calls for a change in the government structure, and maybe there will be some resignations, as it is already today, and I'm recording this on the 12th of January. we had one of the Conservative ministers, he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, he has changed his party, gone over to Reform. So I think there's a few more of those shocks and surprises to come, probably for the British government and for Britain in general. But I've got a list of the things that happen on a day-by-day level here, and the 20th is coming out as a very, very significant day. Not only does the sun enter Aquarius, but as I have just talked about, the Saturn-Uranus are in sextile. We've got the moon in Aquarius on that day. Venus is conjoined to Pluto. And of course, the conjunction between Mercury and Pluto is building, and also that of Mars and Pluto getting closer and closer. So we can expect some pretty big moves, wherever they may be centralized. And I can't look at every country in the world, but I do want to look at Denmark. And the reason I want to look at Denmark is because, of course, one of the things that has been happening recently is that Trump is actually making quite clear his intention to have Greenland. And of course, there's naturally a lot of pushback from Denmark, because Denmark owns Greenland, even though Greenland has a lot of independence and, well, has a right to be independent. They voted still to be part of Denmark, and that's important. They are the Greenlanders themselves want to remain with Denmark, and yet Trump has made a very aggressive statement about the threat posed by Russia and China in those waters, and they need to be defended. I'm not going to get too much into the situation because obviously the US are already there. They can have as many military people as they want there to defend Greenland. They don't have, America doesn't have to own Greenland to be protective of that part of the world and its waters. So I looked at this and I thought, well, what's happening in Denmark's chart? Because this obviously must be a really powerful period if it's about to lose one of its, part of itself, really. And there's not a lot here, I have to tell you, which sort of made me think, well, maybe this is just a storm in a teacup, because it doesn't look as though there is to be any kind of major upset. But then I looked a little closer, and I think you can probably see what I'm looking at. If we look at the 2 o'clock position, we can see Uranus and Pluto together. And Pluto is at 28 degrees of Aries, which means that this new moon is squaring that Pluto. So it is possible that this is a bit of a crisis for the country. And of course, Pluto has to do with the economy because it's in the 8th house. It has and could have something to do with the transference of power or the transformation of power. It remains to be seen. But my initial look at this chart wasn't one of, oh, yes, Denmark is going to hand over Greenland, unless it's not going to be like that. So I kind of put Denmark and Greenland out of the mix. It's in there, and there's a lot of talk about it as we head into this all-important and very volatile period of 2026. But I think, I also took a look at Iran, because this too would seem to be an area that is festering at the moment. And again, the United States has stated that it will come to the rescue of the people. And this is interesting. If we look at, this is the Islamic Republic. There are 2 charts for Iran, and both are significant. The other chart for Iran, which is reflective of the moment the Ayatollah Khomeini arrived on Iranian soil, and that was seen as a deeply symbolic moment. And that was a little earlier in 1979. This was in February of 1979. And there's a strong emphasis in Aquarius on that chart. And that makes me think perhaps that, there could be some very important developments within Iran coming up in the next day or so, moving into this very intense period. That Jupiter at 29 of Cancer is in fact the United States Pluto. So again, we have some Plutonic involvement here. And in a way, you could see the power struggle between these two very, very different nations, one an Islamic republic, the other Christian-based democracy, in inverted commas. So there are things here. Saturn is currently on the Mars of this Iranian chart. And one of the really great problems with Iran, and what really began all of this on the 28th of December, was the economy. That people are starving. The Iranian currency has plunged, and food, water, all of it is in short supply. And this is the main reason for the protest, but it's also a protest against the government, who are busy, of course, defending itself by shooting protesters. So it's a very nasty situation. And I think, again, you can see here, if you look in the 8 o'clock position, there is Saturn at 8 degrees of Virgo, and Neptune in the 5 o'clock position at 20 of Sagittarius. Then a little far apart to be considered a square. But in the earlier chart for Iran, the February one, they are much closer to a Saturn-Neptune square. So we have this idea that the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that's building right now is also underlying or presiding over this potential massive change of everything in Iran, whether it can be achieved diplomatically as opposed to, militarily. We'll have to wait and see. But it does look as though there is going to be some big change in Iran, and it wouldn't surprise me if the US has something to do with all of that, and that we might be looking at all of that taking off around the time of this 20th, 22nd, 23rd of January. Now, other things that are important here, and I'll go through this, sign by sign shortly. We're going to see Neptune entering Aries, and that's going to happen on the 26th of January. Neptune entered Aries last year. It was there for 5 months, so it's not the first time it's been there. We've had a little aperitif, a little appetizer of what Neptune in Aries is all about. And if you are an Aries, but you're a March Aries, especially around 20th, 21st, 22nd of March, then you've got Neptune very close to your sun, and we'll be feeling some effects from this. And also, those of you who have the sun or other personal planets, or any planets or points, at between about 0 degrees and let's say 4 degrees of Aries, Libra, Capricorn, Cancer, then you are already feeling the Neptune effect. Of course, it's the waters of Neptune are muddied because Saturn is there as well. And there is both a beautiful expression of this in the sense that somehow dreams are being realized. Saturn is helping make structure out of those dreams. But you get the exact same interpretation the other way around, and you get, dreams cannot be realized. The reality doesn't fit the dream. And we can play around with those two kind of principles. And I think sometimes when you've got a strong Neptune transit to your sun, or Mercury, Mars, Venus, your personal planets, and the angles, you can go through a period where things do not seem very clear. It seems as though you're being left out of the loop, that things are going on without you being able to control them. And often there is a feeling that you've lost connection with some of the things that were at one time just real pillars and structures in your life. It's like they aren't there anymore. The pillars of your life are crumbling, and that's an uncomfortable position to be in, because we all need to have stability and security, and Neptune eroding that kind of sensation is very uncomfortable. But of course, there's also the possibility that Neptune will inspire. And so, especially if you're a creative, you work in the arts, or you consider what you do creative, or you enjoy creativity, then you're probably going to be doing your best work, because Neptune is inspiring you, and you're coming up with all these ideas from nowhere. There's never just one side of any transit or aspect or anything that's negative or wholly positive. And I think we definitely saw that earlier on in January, when we had a whole fleet of influences, the Sun, Mars, Mercury, Venus, all opposing Jupiter. And that's very, well, Jupiter is a bringer of joy. And we look to Jupiter for success and for expansion, growth, and all the things we like. But that same principle of expansion can easily apply to bad things too. And my goodness, did we see power statements? Did we see things getting out of control? And that's Jupiter as well, the negative side. We like the good side, we don't like the negative. But coming back to Neptune again, there's plenty of inspiration there, plenty of a sense that if you're looking to really develop spiritually and your sensitivity levels, then Neptune will raise those, or that will happen. As Neptune is over your sun, this is the effect that you will feel. So it's not all bad, as I said, but must be taken into consideration. So Neptune enters Aries on the 26th. I think this is quite an interesting point to look at. Let's leave Saturn out of Aries for the moment. We think about ideals again, and we think about how important it is to have beliefs, ideals, visions, all of that, because that's what lifts us up. That's what drives us in many ways. Our dreams drive us. And coming into the sign of Aries, it's almost as though that the quality of that sign, which is a cardinal sign, it's ruled by Mars, we get that kind of sense that this is about going for it. This is about, pursuing dreams, pursuing what you believe in, and fighting for what you believe in. So there's a lot of that kind of coloring to this Neptune in Aries, which I think is kind of interesting. And actually, this does bring me on to another point that I think is quite relevant. And that is, if you remember looking at all those planets grouped all together in a kind of cluster, that effect is going to continue. And even though we could see, Mars and Mercury in Capricorn, Venus and Mars, other planets in Aquarius, and then we go a little bit further, and there we've got planets in Pisces. So we look at it spread out in the signs. That really the important thing is the collection of those planets together. Sometimes I think the sign gets in the way of the really important content, which is what the planets are doing. So although we've got them spread at this time in January between Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, and we might look to April, where we've got a whole lot of things in Aries, or we might say, oh my goodness, well, that's much more important. They're still the same formation. They've just got a different background. And I think we need to remember, we are a member of the solar system. We have the sun at the center. We are planet Earth. We have Venus and Mercury, and then Mars, Jupiter, and so on. All of us moving like a family around our central sun. And our relationship with the planets and the planets' relationships with each other are the most important things. These are the dynamics of astrology. The signs and the zodiac signs are like a kind of background. And a lot of people are confused about this because you think, oh, well, this is to do with the constellations. And in a way, that must make Vedic astrology and that kind of version where it's more to do with where the constellations, you know, the planets in relation to the constellations, allowing for the moon. Oh, I'm not going to get into that. Precession of the equinoxes is not for now. But in point of fact, when we look back and we kind of figure out how did we get the zodiac, which may have some of the names of the constellations in it, Libra, Capricornus, you know, all of them, they're the constellations. But the zodiac is a kind of man-made projection. It's like we created this circle of the zodiac around the orbiting circle of the planets so that we can locate where everything is. We can, you know, locate Mars at 28 of Capricorn. Oh, there it is. That's where we know it is. Whereas in a funny kind of way, it's a little bit spurious. Now, that having been said, you know, when the Babylonians, and we're talking about the first millennia, really, well, the millennia BC, so about 500 BC, we think, was when the zodiac came. You know, the Babylonians started to use this format where you could locate the planets against the background of the zodiac, man-made, developed later by the Greeks, Hellenic astrology, and so on. In a way, that we do recognize that the signs have an effect. They're like a costume that you put on to the sun, the moon, whatever. And it still applies. And of course, I do sun sign astrology, so that's what we talk about. But if ever there is something that you want to nail your colors to and say, this really works, it's always going to be the planets and their relationships one with the other. So maybe there will be a qualitative difference when we get to April and we've got so many planets in Aries. Maybe they will. But at the moment, we've still got all these planets bunched together in a very similar cluster, and they happen to be in Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, still quite close together. Let's see. Well, we'll be able to test the astrology out, if you like, and see, was this period in January? And I'm going to take this period right through to the end of February in the solar eclipse. Was this more volatile, more life-changing, more globally, more powerful than, let's say, when we get to April? We'll be able to measure and judge that. But for my money, so to speak, when the planets are always more important. So let me go quickly through the rest because I want to get on to sign by sign. And so we look on the 27th of January at the Mars-Pluto conjunction. Now, that is the day Mars and Pluto will be together. But remember, they've been drawing together for at least 10 days before that. So the effect is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And a Mars-Pluto conjunction is very, very powerful. It's difficult to contain. While everything has its positives, and any Mars-Pluto angle gives enormous power to achieve things. You dig deep to achieve the result that you want. It gives somebody a lot of power, a lot of commitment, a lot of intensity, a lot of passion. And all of that can be used to enormously good effect. But it can be very destructive. We think about self-sabotage, which is Pluto, Scorpio feel to it. We put Mars in there as well. There's a lot of that around. So we think of that just generally as a principle that we must all be careful of around this latter part of January. Don't self-sabotage things. But of course, because Mars is the agent of war, if you like, and we think about all the conflict that is around at this particular point in time, we are really, really looking at a critical point for certain global situations? Is that the flashpoint? Is that when the rumblings of conflict become much more conscious? Do we see it more? And it is a possibility. And 3 days after that, there's going to be a full moon, which is either going to end this phase of global uncertainty, if we can call it that, but it can also be the time everything comes to a head. But we'll look at that when I come to do the full moon chart on my next video. And by then we'll be looking back and thinking what really happened during this period, the 18th of January through to the 31st of January. So I want to continue with the second part of this video now, which is to look at how things are from your sun sign perspective. And we'll look at the new moon within that as well, but we're looking at it in the bigger picture as well. And for those of you, again, who aren't familiar with the way I work, if you know you're a particular sun sign, please just watch that, take that on board. But if you know your rising sign, for instance, you've got Capricorn rising, then you probably want to look at Capricorn. Because again, it's the planetary positions according to where they are in the diurnal circle, the circle of the horoscope. That's going to give you all sorts of things to do with the areas of life that all these planetary influences are focused on. So Capricorn rising, Sun Capricorn, that's where we're going to begin. And let's have a look at how it looks for you, Capricorn. And I think you can see just by looking at this, what a cluster we've got in your sign and your next door neighbor sign of Aquarius, but they're all very closely together. And I've taken this from the point of view of the new moon. So we're focused on a very, very personal effect. And when we just look at new moons and we think, what is the principle of the new moon? Well, it's a new beginning. And because it's in the first house, which is your persona, this is the you present to the world. It's how you look. It's, how people view you. So it's very personal. And the new moon gives you an opportunity to revamp your image, however you want to take that. Do you want a new haircut or a new outfit, or do you want to do something that makes you look very different, shed pounds, gain pounds, all sorts of things can alter your appearance. But it's also, I think, about, the costume we wear. And of course, we choose different costumes every day, when we decide to go out and we put something on. But if we take that analogy and see it as a metaphor for the costume we wear to everybody who we meet and greet, then you've got this idea that you want new things, you want a new persona, you want things to be different. And here we have Mars and Mercury in your sign. Venus has been in your sign, now working towards Pluto. So we know already there's been a lot going on in your life that's had to say, are you happy with the way things are? And if you're not happy, then this is the time to do something about it. And not to sort of delay it and say, well, let's wait and see how X, Y, Z works out, and then maybe we'll do this. It is a call to arms, Capricorn. If you want to change, if you want your life to change, then you really have to get behind it. And now we look at the position of Pluto, because it's the way all these planets pass over Pluto that is going to be the main theme for you in this late January, February period. So we're looking at self-worth. We're looking at how your own values, what are your values in life? And, whether you are living up to the values you have or you're making compromises. How are other people treating you? How is your value as a person? How do you see that in the way other people are treating you, whether they're paying you a salary, whether they're paying what they owe you, whether you are able to get monies in. And how that occurs is because of people's trust and value in you. So Pluto's long journey through this second house will only become active when you've got a personal planet or a point involved with it. So, it's not going to be 20 years of the same thing. It's not. It's only going to be active when it's active. But really, there are going to be huge peaks and troughs financially for you. And this could be one period where you really see that. You've either come into money, or you know that you're going to make good money, or absolutely the reverse. You feel you've lost money, that your income is compromised, and that you are fearful about survival because of your financial situation. Everything changes, and whatever tunnel Pluto is taking you through, it's about finding resources to deal with the situation. That's why we're put through a plutonic tunnel. We wouldn't choose to go through it ourselves, but it's only by going through it that we realize, guess what? I can do this. Guess what? I have what it takes to do that. So it's a huge plutonic kind of process of really emerging out of it with a much better sense of what really counts in life, how you can survive, and the things that you thought you needed to survive, you don't need, and the things that you learned you do need. That is the plutonic journey. And this period of time, the second half of January through to the end of February, this is probably going to be one of those periods in which everything I'm saying is going to make a lot of sense to you in one way or another. Aquarius, well, of course, you are the center of everything because Pluto is in your sign, as you can see here, the symbol for Pluto in the first house, just ahead of it, Venus. And I put the new moon in there in the 12th house, as well as Mercury and Mars. And during the next 4 weeks, all the planets currently in that 12th house of yours are going to enter Aquarius and pass over that Pluto. So you are on the edge of a powerful plutonic period. And certainly if your birthday is anywhere from the 20th to the 27th of January, then you're right in the center of this plutonic, I was going to say cyclone, but it's not really quite like that. You're at the center of the story here. And for the moment, it's going to be the Aquarians who are born in at that time with birthdays who are going to really feel this particular period. There are going to be events and things happening that are going to change life for you in some way or another. Now, if you also are an Aquarian and you know you've got planets and points between 0 and 5 degrees of Aquarius or Leo or Scorpio or Taurus, you too are in a life-changing period. Now, we can look at this in so many ways because everybody is different. There are Aquarians all over the world at different ages, different interests. Every Aquarian is its own person, so to speak. But nevertheless, the planets are this dialogue, they are influencing you. And the ultimate aim here is core change, so that your values, your core self are fundamentally changed by what you go through. Now, we can have some very powerful and wonderful plutonic experiences. Having a baby, I think, is a very plutonic experience. It's life and giving birth. So the painful journey to that wonderful moment is very plutonic. And of course, we can experience a death and a rebirth in our own lives when something new is struggling to emerge, it involves a painful journey. And I think we need to look at that metaphor, because it will help you enormously if you are struggling right now, and will do during these last couple of weeks of January and into February. You really feel as though, this is very, very hard going, and you're not enjoying any of the events that you're living through. I think if you see it as purposeful, and it's the same theme really for everybody, but in slightly different ways, is this idea of digging deep to find the answer that you need to the situations that are besetting you. And it is like, I think about Pluto and the underworld, and we think about how dark and fearful that underworld was, but yet Pluto's kingdom had great riches in it. It's the same really with the idea of rich minerals in the earth. And only by digging deep, by drilling down, can you find those rich minerals, and that applies to the riches within yourself. And nobody would do that voluntarily. We don't go into the dark voluntarily. We're pushed in there. And that's events that have conspired to take us there, whether that's through a relationship, whether it's through a job, whether it's through a life emergency, whether it can be a variety of reasons. But if you're in that birthday group or that degree group that I've mentioned, then this is a very powerful journey to the underworld. And it's the journey out of it that really fashions you into this new person. The new moon itself, and of course at the time of the new moon, Mercury and Mars are in the 12th house. So as we start this period off, it's like it's a good time to prepare. And I think a lot of preparation we can do for a Pluto transit is that we need to be able to let go. And we need to tell ourselves that hanging on to something can be very detrimental to us. And therefore, to let it go, even if you don't want to let it go, is the thing to do, and then learn to live without it. That can apply to anything, to a bad habit, to an addiction, to a relationship, to anything. But that's the principle involved. So Aquarius, really, as I said, you are the center of this. And in a way, you are given the greatest gift of all, this transformation of you as a person on so many levels. But it's a hard walk, and that needs to be remembered as well. We come to Pisces now. You can see the way I've drawn this. We can see Mercury, Mars, the Sun and Moon in the 11th house, Venus and Pluto in the 12th. But let's not forget, they're all clustered together. And this whole period from really from now until the 19th of 20th of February, when the sun will be in your sign, the Saturn-Neptune Conjunction, and we're moving towards a lunar eclipse then, after a solar eclipse. There's a lot going on in terms of your view of the world. And I mean that in the sense that the things around and about you would shape your world in a way. And that's also your social world, your friends, your teammates, your workmates, if you work, the people you choose to be with, because you're kindred spirits, you share similar views and similar interests. There's a lot of accent on that. And there's also a lot of accent on what I would say this is a difficult one, because it's a lot of things that haven't been confronted. Let's put it that way. And I mean, we're all guilty of this. I mean, if we continually churn up old miseries and we can't get over old wounds, that's very negative, and it does prevent us from moving on. That's for sure. But by the same token, if we do push something down and we don't acknowledge it and we just say, I don't need that, I just want to get on with my life, and yet somehow it hasn't been processed, it festers. And with Pluto in the 12th house and all these planets moving over Pluto in the 12th house, there's a sense that what's been festering must come out. And this can be anything. When we think about, we've ignored a health problem. We've got this pain, we've got this bump, we've got this toothache, we've got this whatever it may be. And we don't want to do anything about it because we're just too busy. But yet we pushed it down. Then we're going to learn much more about it. But that again is a metaphor or something we haven't faced. We don't want to face the problem. We don't want to face the fact that we got hurt. And really, we need to feel that we got hurt, work our way through it, so it then doesn't become something that just pops up every time you get in a similar situation. And which is what may happen, Pisces, that you suddenly find yourself in a situation and you think, oh, I've been here before and I don't like this. Why am I here again? It's because it wasn't fully processed the time before and it needs processing now. And by nature, Pisces, you are a very giving sign, you're a very fluid sign, and you'd rather go around something than have a confrontation or any of that. But occasionally, it's good for you to confront things and confront people and sort of say, look, ouch, this hurt, or I don't like this, or this is not the way I want to go on. So I think Pluto will bring up in you this reservoir of resentment that you've had for always being the nice person or always being the one everyone expects to do this, that, and the other for. It's time, really, Pisces, to say, look, that I'm not going to be used in this way. And I think, again, with Pluto, it goes back quite some distance. It might go right back to your childhood. And it might be very interesting to think about your dreams and the images that are coming in dreams, because these might be very illustrative of where the festering situation is. And we just need to address it. We just need to look at it and not bury it, just acknowledge it without it becoming a millstone that we're consciously bearing or something that's unconscious. We just have to look at it and figure out how best to work with it and move on forward from it. Okay, so that's this powerful Plutonic message for you. And there's more, of course, to come with Saturn and Neptune moving out of your sign. But of course, they're moving on to another part of your horoscope. They haven't left the zodiac. And I think this whole idea of what Pluto is, this Pluto process is all about, is very good, because it sets you up for Saturn and Neptune's journey through the second house, which is, I am a person of value and I expect to be treated for what I am worth. Okay, Pisces? Aries. My goodness, I've talked a bit about Aries in my overview a little while ago, and pointed to the fact that by the time we get to April, all this cluster of planets will be in your sign. But they're still important where they are right now. And the position of Pluto is very important. Now, if we look just at the new moon alone, and we think the new moon is in your 10th house, quite close to Mars and Mercury, Venus and Pluto, they're all clustered together. This does say something about your career, if you have one. And if you don't have a career, then it says something about your plans for the future. So there's something new here. So it may be that there's something new coming to you is in the form of, I want to do this. This is something new I want to do. This is, I'm behind it. But because of the way, we've got Pluto and Uranus, and we've got everything happening here, it looks to me as though something changes or something is now offered to you because things have changed. So we're looking at everything from perhaps a new job that's ahead of you, or the fact that how a new job is going to come about is because you've lost the other one. that's Pluto is endings and beginnings, and it puts you through that process of letting go and building anew, which might have a reference to your career and your place in the world. But Pluto itself and all these personal planets are going to trigger this Pluto of yours in the 11th house. Has a lot to do with many things in life that give you a sense of being part of a community, part of a bigger picture. Let me try to explain this in another way. We're looking at the 10th house. When something happens in the 10th house, it's very much about my survival, earning money, having a job, being respected, all those kind of things. But when we move into the 11th house, it's more about, well, what does that all mean? What does it mean? I mean, unless I'm happy, unless what I think I'm doing is worthwhile and valuable, and I'm being with people who I'm resonating with at a level of consciousness, I mean, what's the point? So Pluto here, I think in some ways is probably changing your tribe or making you aware of the tribe that you should be with. And of course, sometimes our tribe is our family. And, we're very happy with that. We feel we belong to this family. It is our tribe. But sometimes we don't think that. We know we've got a family, but we are feeling more of a sense of being part of something like a tribe with other people, whether that's because we believe in the same things, we kind of share the same principles and values, or whatever it may be. So Pluto is profoundly changing this aspect of your life. And of course, it may throw up family issues, strangely enough, because we are taught that our family is our family. And so when we may feel that we're not part of our family, and that's not where we feel at home, but there's this whole bunch of people over here that I feel I found my home, that can be quite a big kind of moment. So this is part of what's going on with Pluto in the 11th house, and it will be awoken every time a planet pops over Pluto or, angles it in terms of your natal chart. So this is also about working with people as well. And working as a team isn't always an Aries thing. Aries is very much its own person. And this makes you a good leader, it makes you someone who's a pioneer, someone who can go it alone. But getting together with a whole group of other people has its challenges. So Pluto is also bringing you to this point, how to really work with people, how to sacrifice the ego for the group ego, if you like. So you may find yourself in power struggles when you get into a team, or when you suddenly find yourself with a group of people that suddenly there are kind of a sense of a power struggle going on. And what I think Pluto will be urging, I don't like the idea that the planets make you do anything, but let's look at this process that we're seeing indicated. It's really about saying, okay, all right, I'm going to have to drop that opinion. I'm going to have to drop my natural pushiness, if you like. And I'm going to have to learn from what other people can offer me and how I can be part of a team. So that's the real lesson of Pluto. And it's a long lesson, but it is all about working as a team. And because of the way the planets are moving at the moment, you're going to be in some kind of situation where what I've said is going to apply. And I think if you remember what I said, and you'll drop the ego, and you'll drop your natural kind of desire for your input on things, and you let other people, come forward, let's see what happens. You're going to learn a lot from this Pluto, these planets' passage over Pluto, because otherwise you're going to end up being rejected from or ejected from a group. simply because they can't work with you. And that's a very good principle for me to leave you with, a bit of thoughtfulness here. Okay, Aries. And on to Taurus. Taurus, Pluto for you, as you can probably see here, is in a very, very important part of your horoscopes in the 10th house. And the 10th house is about your place in the world. And I use that because although we look at this for career in the main, not everybody has a career. Not everybody wants a career. Some people are retired. So it isn't applicable. But I think if we think about this area of the chart as things that we want to be and do, they're on our agenda, we want to fulfill our ambitions in the 10th house. So it can apply to career. And again, depending what age you are and your circumstances, where you live, all of that, your experience of life, it could be that you're going to, at some point when your personal planets connect with Pluto, and in fact, this may be what lies in store in these next 4 to 6 weeks, is that you're going to be offered an amazing job. It's going to really elevate you. So you'll be moving into a position of greater power. That having been said, whenever we get Pluto involved, there's always something that we're going to find very, very difficult. And I often think, when people become celebrities overnight, or they do something amazing and everybody thinks they're wonderful, winning the lottery, even things like that. There's a lot of negativity with that because people resent you. People think you've changed. Instead of feeling warm and fluffy towards you, they resent it and they expect you to do things for them. And that's what happens sometimes when Pluto brings you something wonderful and gives you, it doesn't do that, but that's just a way of working with Pluto. At the time that this happens, Pluto is where it is. That's wonderful for you at the time, but it has repercussions. And I think that's something worth thinking about. But by the same token, with Pluto in this area, you may find that there are power struggles at work. There are power struggles. You keep running into power struggles. And often you come off the worse for wear in those power struggles. You are the one who limps away feeling bullied. But it can be the other way. And I think it's always important, if you check yourself when you're in a situation where it's not very comfortable. There are power struggles for positions or over choices or options, and you feel very strongly about it. I think when you've got Pluto in this area, while of course you can be strong about your opinions and your desires and you can want to bring them about, but you have to check yourself that you're not really overriding other people's wishes and really controlling them rather than you. So there's always a downside with that. If we look at these next 6 weeks or so, as these planets, come over this Pluto in your 10th house, there is both the option to do something that you've never done before and to challenge yourself to do something you've never done before, which once you've done it will make a great difference to the way you go forward after that. It's a bit like facing your fear, but there's also this idea of facing what you've always wanted to do, and that too can, be a tricky experience. So I think that's in there in these next 6 to 8 weeks. But the new moon itself, we can see, is in the 9th house. So this 9th house is about journey, whether we're talking about travel, we're talking about other countries, we're talking about things that you are involved with that sort of either take you out of your comfort zone, but it can also be knowledge and information that you are acquiring. And on a very simple level, maybe you're going to start a new course around the time of this new moon. or you're going to make a journey. And it's this journey that changes your life, because all these planets clustered around Pluto, including the new moon, really and truly, are all about how much this can potentially change your life. Gemini. Pluto for you is in a very kind of accommodating area of the horoscope. So as these personal planets, the Mercury, the Moon, Mars, the Sun, they all move over Pluto. They're going to bring out the meaning of Pluto in this area. And again, especially so if you have planets and points between 0 and 5 degrees of Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, or Scorpio. So a journey is always involved with Pluto. And if we think about the journey into the underworld, which might be a perilous journey, or we think about the rich treasure that lies at the heart of the underworld, it's the attaining of that treasure and the bringing it back out again. That's the journey that Pluto offers. And in the 9th house, it really is a journey. It can be a journey in knowledge. And if you're thinking about this as I'm talking, and you're thinking, well, I'm just about to begin this course. I'm just going to start on this journey in knowledge and in experience, whatever it is. This is your Plutonic journey, and it will take you deep. And always with Pluto, we have to dig deep. And sometimes I think, Gemini, you're a very multi-layered kind of person, but also you like to be free. You like to sometimes just graze over the surface of things. And so you get through a lot more without getting bogged down with detail or emotion or any of that. And I think this is where Pluto will come in, because you won't be able to do that with Pluto. Pluto is inviting you to go deep, whether this is about a relationship and really feeling very, very powerful feelings for someone you've never had before, or whether some other experience in your life touches you in a way that you can't rationalize it. You simply have to go with it. And the purpose of Pluto, of course, is to transform you at core level. Now, you may be among the Geminis who have this experience quite shortly. So there is something that's going to happen over the next 4 to 6 weeks, maybe even a little longer. And that experience is going to change you profoundly. Now, I can talk as prettily as I want about the idea of starting a course, a journey in knowledge that will change you profoundly. And that's certainly in there. But we've got to be real as well and think about those things that come out of left field, whether it is about someone walking into your life and absolutely changing it because of who they are and how you feel about them. But there can be other instances in life, other experiences, events that you weren't expecting that can have the same purpose. You can't just ignore it. You can't be superficial about it. You've got to really, really, really go in there deep and explore it, experience it. And when you come out the other side of it, you will be a more substantial person. It's a profound journey. That's what Pluto is in there for. If we look strictly at the new moon, that's in the 8th house. That's actually Pluto's territory, but it's also a financial area of the horoscope. So there may be something to do here with an inheritance or some kind of settlement. And that is the whole reason why you're digging deep, why you go on this journey. And on a very, very practical, superficial level, we could say that this January period, especially around the new moon of the 18th, is a good time to make an investment, to deal with financial situations, but to be prepared for the actions that you're taking or the actions other people take in regard to you will have profound consequences. Okay, Gemini? Cancer. Pluto has but about 2 years ago, really fully entered the 8th house of your solar chart. And we can see it there in the 8th house, up close and personal with Venus in this chart. But as we look before it in the 7th house, we see Mercury and Mars, Moon and the Sun, all of which are going to pass over Pluto in your 8th house over the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks. And they will bring out the nature of Pluto, what it's there for, what messages it has, what experiences lie ahead. Now, there are going to be 20 years in which Pluto is in this area of your horoscope, and it's not going to be like this for 20 years. But periodically, when planets move across it, especially your natal planets and points, then you're likely to have an experience. And it's good to know what Pluto is doing here in the 8th house. It's taking you in deep. And you are already a water sign and a sensitive sign, an intuitive sign, a sign that feels things very intensely. So you don't really need any additional help from Pluto to help you feel more deeply. But I think sometimes with Cancer, what happens is that you do not always like to face things that are uncomfortable. You don't want to do what you don't want to do. You don't like to go places where it might be difficult for you. So I think you can avoid sometimes issues. Now, the issues that you're probably not going to enjoy getting deeply into are, on the one hand, things to do with finances, and on the other, the deeper layers of a relationship. So we're looking at intimacy and sex. So there's a lot offered here by Pluto, because all of us may have some idea that when we really have someone with whom we have that deep intimacy, what an extraordinary and powerful bond that can be, and how it can change our life. So that's what Pluto is offering you. But often the journey to finding that level of intimacy with someone that is really fulfilling is quite a hard one. And when Pluto can take you on a difficult journey with perhaps some senses of struggles with intimacy, or having people or partners who, I'm not saying openly abuse you, but there are people who may not address your deepest needs. And the experience of being with someone who it's all about their needs and not your needs can be very difficult. And sometimes on the way to finding that true bond and that true sense of giving and receiving that we have with a really healthy sexual relationship, on the way to it, it's like you've got to kiss a few frogs before you get your prince, kind of thing. And it's just an analogy I'm using here. But sex and intimacy aren't the only things in the 8th house. This is also about money, and how often money, sex, and power are deeply involved with each other. And Pluto here shows that at some point during this long 20-year cycle, you are likely to come into money, whether that means you'll be left money by a relative or a benefactor, or whether your investments yield a fantastic sum. But the opposite can be the case as well. And if you're in a partnership, a financial partnership, or you've got investments, it's possible that you would come out of it badly. Pluto is extreme. It's all or nothing. And we have to be prepared for both scenarios. And given that this is a 20-year cycle, it's a pretty, long time to experience both these aspects of Pluto. It's a journey you can't avoid. And I often say with Pluto, you don't see it coming, the event. And that's purposeful, because it blindsides you. And it's recovering from being blindsided, whether that's to do with a relationship and a betrayal, or all the things I've talked about with intimacy, or whether it's financial and loss, or being cut out of a legacy, or whatever it may be. You're blindsided by that. But it is the journey through it, coming out the other side, that's important, because what you'll gain is an understanding that I didn't really need that. And I don't need it. And that is liberation, a kind of death and a rebirth in that way. So, that's one thing to think about, Cancer, as this 6-week, 8-week period goes by with all these planets crossing over Pluto. You may get a sense of everything that I've told you here. Leo, well, Pluto for you, of course, is in your opposite sign and has been for a couple of years now. And I think if you're an early Leo, which means you've got a July 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd birthday, then you've already experienced what this planet can do in the sense of elevating you, but also presenting such a challenge that you feel you're going to go under. I think there are lots of things to take away from this. First of all, Pluto in your opposite sign, there's the potential here for great events that sort of transform you in a way that who you were and what you did and how life was bears no resemblance to what it is now. And I think and the reason for that is another person or a company or a group. The reason that your life has totally changed is because of other people. And I think if we can keep it that loose, it gives you something to make adjustments to according to the exact nature of events that go with that. So at the moment, and through to the end of this year, if you have a birthday between about the 22nd and the 27th of July, you're definitely going to feel a kind of Plutonic aura to life. All or nothing, sort of extremes, great and good things happen and also awful things. So it seems that there is no halfway medium with anything. It's all or nothing. That's one of the expressions of Pluto. And as these planets, Mars, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, and the Moon, of course, cross over Pluto in this period of January through February, and then we have a solar eclipse in this same area in February, then this is one of the most intense periods of 2026 for the future of a relationship or for the effects that the impact other people can have on your life. Now, just saying that is enough. The impact other people have on your life. That's going to cover a lot of different experiences for all you Leos out there, because some of you are going to find you're working with a company and what the company does and how you are treated is fitting the bill. For others of you, it's about a business partnership, you and one other person. For others of you, it's about a marriage. For others, it's about a romance or a very important friendship. So, or somebody new walking into your life that completely pulls the rug out from underneath you, changes everything. These are all the things offered by Pluto because it comes through other people and their effect on you, on your particular life. So what Pluto is showing here is, on the one hand, the lengths and depths someone will go to for you, but also the lengths and depths people will go to hurt you, to destroy you, in the sense of competition. So power struggles are common when we've got Pluto in the mix, and most often that turns out to be work, people jockeying for position. But it can be, you can have a power struggle with your partner. And the power struggle may be over differences in decision makings. You want one thing, your partner wants another, and then you get into a power struggle. And I think that's why we get this phrase, or what I've just used: you'll discover the lengths and depths people are going to go to because they love you or because they choose to destroy you. And that is worth bearing in mind, because we all run into people and situations from time to time which we think we can handle, and then we find that the opposite number, so to speak, is not going to play it by our rules, and therefore we have some difficulties. So I think a lot of polarities in your life are going to be exposed by these transits of the planets over Pluto in your 7th house in the next 6 weeks, let's say. And there are going to be issues that will come up that will divide you and another person. And it's up to you, really, in a way, as to whether you decide to bridge those differences or to come to the idea that, you just can't accept this. So it's just not going to work for you. So there will be some breakups for Leos over, the relationship can't proceed with this extreme kind of difference between you. But also there is the making of a relationship, and that with very powerful feelings and a sense that you are destined to be with this person, there will also be some very, very powerful mergers for some Leos. But I think it's important. The main thing that I want for you to take away from what we're looking at over this 6-week period is this idea that, don't underestimate people, whether you underestimate their love for you or underestimate their power to really make life difficult. Okay, Leo? Virgo. Pluto for you is currently in the 6th house of your solar chart. It will continue to be there for almost 20 years. But as I've said to everybody, it's not going to be 20 years of same old, same old. It's only when you get personal planets going over Pluto, which is now, or when Pluto makes an aspect to your personal planets or points, that you're going to get the Plutonic experience. Otherwise, it's just going to just be in the background somewhere, not really making any kind of difference. But we've got to face the effect of all these planets clustered together. They're somewhere in our natal chart. They're certainly showing their effects in, neon lighting out in the world. We can see this great churning transformation, these things that are happening that seem to be enormous. They're enormous events. And that's going to trickle down to us as well, whether as the result of these enormous global events or whether it's events in our life that we're sort of experiencing and dealing with. Technically, this area of the chart where Pluto is and where all these planets will be passing over is the 6th house of what we call work and well-being. But I look at this area of the chart as the engine of the chart. This is where everything happens. So whether we look at our everydayness of life, and that's where most of us are every day, right? Our everyday life is our life. I mean, occasionally we get to have a holiday or something rather nice happens to us, and then that becomes, wow, that's a difference. But mostly it's the everyday that constitutes our world. Put Pluto in there, and it's going to throw up or throw out that pattern. So something changes your everydayness. Now, it can be anything from a new baby. That certainly throws out how your everyday used to be. But it can also be the fact that you've lost your job, or you must work from home, or you now have to go much further to work than you used to do. It's going to throw out your everyday life. It could be that you have a relative coming to live with you, or you have to rent out part of your home to somebody else. That's going to change the rhythm of life. Or maybe it's because something happens to you. Maybe your mobility is affected, or maybe you've got some allergy, and therefore things have to change to make your environment healthier. So there's so many levels at which Pluto and the everyday can come together and make for big changes in the way your life runs. Slightly more deeper, if you like, this area is about doing the work of spirit. And if you are spiritually inclined, and which you may well be, because here you are watching me, Then there can be some profound changes in how you view your spiritual path. And I think a lot of people always want to know what their purpose is. And I guess with Pluto in this area, that is one of the possibilities, that it will become clear to you what your purpose is. And really and truly, all our purpose in general is that we serve others. I mean, if we're all busy serving other people are serving us too. There is this idea that we are doing the right thing, we are fulfilling our purpose. And I think Virgo is a very service-oriented sign, and you like doing things that for other people that are appreciated. So we see this much bigger, in bigger terms with Pluto here, that your sense of service becomes much more of a spiritual act than it has done before. But coming back to, again, we can take, all the planets and everything in astrology in different areas and different layers. I certainly think over 20 years, you can guarantee there'll be some health issue at some point. And maybe this is the point at which you are dealing with a health issue, whether it's a dental health issue or whether it's something that, is much more complicated than that. The diagnosis means big changes in your routine. But that's only one of many things. And if we look at the new moon per se, which happens just before it, which is in the 5th house of creativity, I think another thing that we might throw into the mix here with the idea of transformation and big changes in the everyday are things to do with children, babies, offspring, and other things that are creative endeavors. And one of the things I would say, just looking at the new moon in Capricorn in this 5th house, is that when we're creatively involved with something, we're in a creative act, in a funny kind of way, we lose ourselves, don't we? We lose ourselves in the creative act. And I think there's something about that too, when I look at this cluster of planets with Pluto as its centerpiece. Libra. Pluto for you is in your fellow air sign of Aquarius, and it is making its long journey through your 5th house. And the 5th house is really a very creative and very kind of, it's an area that rules the heart. And I often think that when your heart is involved in something, then it becomes a passion, then it becomes something that drives you. So we can be very kind of flexible with our interpretation of this 5th house. It's a nice area of the horoscope. When we're creatively involved with something, we do lose ourselves in that creative act. And that's why affairs of the heart come into the 5th house, and why having babies and offspring, those are offerings from ourselves. And, we nurture them. So the 5th house is an abundant area. The heart, whether we're talking about the physical heart and activities that keep the heart beating, or whether we're thinking about things that capture our heart in a kind of figurative way, it's a great area. But here comes Pluto into that area. And we get this idea that Pluto, in his great transformational act, is going to change things. So it's 20 years that Pluto is going to be in here. So there's plenty of time to sample all potential. For instance, during this time, you could fall passionately in love with someone, get married to them or not married to them, but have children with them. And your children could even grow up and become enormously important, or they require your, they're exceptional in some way. Something about them is exceptional, and then that involves you in nurturing that or nurturing them. So a full 20 years gives a lot of time for Pluto to reveal its hand in so many ways. But we look at the initial one, and we've got Mercury and Mars, Venus, the sun, the moon, all going to go over Pluto in this fifth house, awakening it. Certainly, if you've got planets and points between 0 and 5 of the fixed signs, that is Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, or Scorpio, you are definitely in for a plutonic ride in 2026. So this is when you may suddenly realize you are. So let's look at the possibilities here in the coming few weeks. You may meet someone who literally knocks your socks off. That person is like catnip. Oh, but that doesn't sound very, passionate, does it? Catnip. But what I mean is irresistible, compelled to be with that person. But the result of that love affair or whatever it is will have big, big ramifications across the rest of your life. We can look at it and think, well, is this the beginning of happy ever after? And as I've just described it, you meet, you get together, you have children, and your children become the center of all sorts of things. That's a plutonic story of the fifth house from start to finish. But it can also be a very powerful connection with someone, and that can cause heartbreak. Whether we mean other people get hurt by this relationship, or you get hurt by this relationship. But the thing with Pluto is it's unavoidable. You don't see it coming. You get knocked off your feet. And it's the journey that Pluto takes you on that this is all about. And when we think about Libra, this air sign, you like to be balanced in your opinions. You like to not feel torn apart by situations. You don't like getting entangled in deep emotional waters. You just want everything to, feel good. You want everything to be fine. But Pluto isn't like that. And so it's unavoidable. You'll get taken to the depths with Pluto here at some point. And for some of you Librans, that's going to be, in these next few weeks, there's going to be an incident, an event, or something that happens. And you'll realize straight away, because you'll remember what I'm saying to you, that this is not something you can just say, oh, it'll be all right tomorrow. It'll be fine. No, it won't. This is something that's going to compel you to go into it. It's going to take you into some places that you've never been to before. And obviously I'm talking about psychologically, emotionally. I'm not really talking about, places on earth. It's emotional psychology, the psychological, even physical in the sense of effort. And certainly if you're about to give birth in these next 6 weeks, that is your Pluto story, isn't it? I already, touched on that idea of the effort and pain and all of that proceeds before this delivery happens. And there is quite a kind of image that I think you should have here, Libra, as you think about this. It is that one. It is that walking through that dark tunnel, that underworld that Pluto takes us to. Keep on going, keep on finding resources to deal with it. And once you're out of it, that is delivery. Okay? Scorpio. Well, Pluto, of course, is your ruling planet, and it's a very, very important planet. I don't care two hoots that's been demoted to a celestial dwarf. It's still Pluto. It's still the planet of extremes. It's a planet that takes you to the depths, but also to the heights. It's the planet that allows you to reinvent yourself, to also come through very difficult situations stronger and better than you were before. It gives you a formidable psychological and emotional strength. And Pluto is like that as a planet, in a way. What this planet represents is a journey that takes you through all sorts of darkness and difficulty. But the result at the end of it is that you're stronger, better, you are transformed really at core level. That's the process that's going on. That may be something you are familiar with, Scorpio. Depends on your age and your circumstances, but certainly by the time you're a teenager, then I think you already know what it is. Some situation has taken you to hell and back. And that is the first stage of putting you through things to make you stronger, better, wiser, lighter in the terms of being a light being, so to speak. So as where Pluto is at the moment, we're looking at the fourth house, the actual base of the horoscope. And when we look at that point in the chart, it's the roots of life and also the foundations of the future. It's a terribly important place. So Pluto and its journey through this fourth house over the next 20 years is going to change things at root level. So there are many ways we could look at this. We could look at, let me just make a story up here. Let's say you are born in a country where there's a revolution. And so you find yourself a refugee. You have to leave your country. That could be a Pluto transit of your fourth house. Let's say that you are, just an ordinary kind of person. And what happens is that you inherit money and it absolutely changes you completely because you go from being just an ordinary person into someone who has wealth. That can be a big Pluto, well, an expression of Pluto in the fourth house. But we can look at it the other way as well, because Pluto and the fourth house have a lot to do with family. And, when Pluto moves through the fourth house, there can be some family rifts. There can be things that happen within the family that forge estrangement and very difficult responses to it. Now, there's nothing you can do about this because Pluto and his invisible helmet means that the situation will take you by surprise. It isn't terminal. Pluto, if you end up with a family rift, it doesn't have to be terminal. But what it's going to require is some kind of very deep journeys, a very deep dive on your part into the part you played in this. And that's difficult. God, it's difficult for us all. I mean, something happens with our family and they won't speak to us. The tendency is to think it's their fault, but some self-examination is needed and some honesty about how things might look from another perspective. So we go on this journey to the underworld with a sense that our family isn't behind us, or we've got problems within the family. You're only ever as happy as your unhappiest child, that kind of thing. So there will be a journey of that kind taken over these 20 years. That's how long Pluto's going to take to go through this area. But it won't be there all the time, and it doesn't mean a situation is going to last 20 years. It's going to be when you get transits, Pluto transits to your personal planets and points, or a situation like we've got now, with all these personal planets crossing over Pluto at this point in your chart, so that you're going to get some experience here. And especially if you have a birthday, you're an October Scorpio, or you've got planets and points between 0 and 5 degrees of Scorpio, Taurus, Leo, and Aquarius. And there are going to be other points during the year when Pluto will be activated by the personal planets. And I'm not going to get into them now, but the chances are with this one, and there's going to be a solar eclipse in your fourth house as well, in the middle of February, and the Saturn-Neptune Conjunction. There's just such a lot happening that the chances are there is going to be something of a situation which is not of your making, which forces you to draw on your reserves, but also to look deep inside yourself. We could look at the fourth house as well as our deepest center, the home within ourselves. So Pluto forces us to do this self-examination that isn't comfortable. We have to come to terms with the darkness of our being as well as the lightness of our being. We can deal with the light, but the dark is hard work. So there is some confrontation here to do with examining you, the past, the way things have worked out, and how they play into the present, and how they may affect particularly your situation within the family or of your family. Now, I've also mentioned this idea of coming into money. So this is also another aspect of Pluto in the fourth, that while you could inherit, and that might all be very nice, even if it's sad because you've lost the person, there can also be incredible wrangles and upsets over inheritances. And I think the way to think about that is that to make sure, let's say, that you can do something about this prior to that would be, to have some kind of discussion about what is to come and some kind of agreement and understanding before you get embroiled in a dreadful family conflict over money. And not everybody, not every Scorpio is going to have that experience, but it is common with a Pluto transit of this fourth house. And occasionally there are big changes in your world because the fourth house is opposite the 10th house. So big changes in your career, big changes in your social circumstances. They could be great and good, but they have a real effect of perhaps, alienating you from people who may be jealous and resentful of your good fortune, because Pluto can elevate us every bit as much as take something away that we feel we can't be without. So certainly for these next 6 to 8 weeks, Scorpio, be aware that if there are any sense of things not being quite right, rather than let it all kind of play out, to pay attention to the things that you sense that need to be shored up. And also to be, I suppose, in a way, rather fatalistic about what happens in this next 6 to 8 weeks, because it is a journey. It's something that you have to go through, and accepting that it's how you get through it now, the other side is what it's all about, I think will help you immensely to deal with whatever comes across your path in these next 6 to 8 weeks, whether, as I say, it's absolutely wonderful, or whether what you're facing is something you're not really liking at all. Sagittarius. Pluto for you has been in your third house for the last couple of years. It was in and out in 2024, but it's now fully ensconced in there. And the third house is about your outlook, really. And this can be anything to do with, where you live, your outlook, the street outside, the fields outside, your neighborhood. So it can be your small world, but it can also be your outlook on the world in the sense of the opinions you have, the views you hold, and the things that, the information that feeds your opinions and the way you look at your life unfolding. Opinions, events, they all shape who we are and where we want to be in life. So it's a pretty important area. And when you see these planets coming across Pluto in the third, Mars, Mercury, the Sun, Moon, Venus, all conjoining Pluto and moving across the other side over the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks, There's going to be something that's going to change your outlook. If we just use that phrase, we can think, oh, well, yes, I'm moving house. I look out of my window and I've got a new outlook. But it's probably more than that. It could be that the events that are happening around you are such that they really affect you deeply and you want to be active about them. Pluto stirs the activist within. And of course, at this particular time, people are out on the streets all over the world protesting the state of the government or whatever else it is. And you are more likely to be stirred by the fact that you need to have a voice and the voice of your concerns need to be heard. So you're much more likely to join a political group or be active in your neighborhood or your area to get things put right. And it may be that a situation develops that causes that. In other words, something happens, whether it's in the big wide world or whether it's in your smaller world, and you think, I've got to do something about this. And so you use your platform, whether you use a website, YouTube channel, Instagram, and you get your message out there because you feel what you're going through or what you've observed happening needs to be something that's addressed, and you want to have this addressed in a bigger picture. There are also other ways that this, Pluto transit, and with all these planets moving across Pluto, you might get caught up in some kind of a situation where there are complaints, and not a lawsuit necessarily, but there's some aspect of law. And in some way, you are part of that picture. Now, it may be that, you don't feel you have anything to do with it, but somehow you're drawn into it. And there's going to be something around this idea of you being part of a collective, as opposed to you just being individual you, that Pluto will draw you into. You are much more likely to feel intensely about situations than you usually do. Now, there's another thing here. You may be traveling in these next few weeks. You may be on holiday, going away for business. There's something that's going to take you to a different part of your country or a different part of the world. And it's that, what happens on that journey, what you see, what you're exposed to, that also fundamentally changes your perception of things. And once our perception changes, everything changes. So you see how important this area of the chart is. It looks as though, it's the third house, travel and communication, but it's much more than that. We have something that powerfully changes the way we look at the world, the way we feel about ourselves, the people who are our nearest and dearest, our neighbors even, that profoundly changes, then everything changes. Okay, Sagittarius? Well, that takes me all the way through the zodiac and leaves me just with my conclusion, something to wrap all this up in some nice little package. Something occurred to me during the course of the last few days as, we've entered this new year, 2026, and it's always in those first kind of early days of a new year that we do think, oh, I want to do this and let that happen. And I'm going to get behind this now. I'm not going to let another year go by without I don't do this. And then what happens is that life gets in the way. What we thought we were going to do, we can't do because this has happened and that's happened. And suddenly we are no longer focusing on those things that we have high hopes for, determination to achieve. They've sort of fallen by the wayside. And I look at these aspects that I've been talking about, what's coming up in the next few weeks. And there's going to be a lot of the year that is quite similar. There's going to be a lot of big, important events and things happening in our own lives that are going to, take up our time and our energies. And by the time, we've got halfway through the year, we'll look back and think, I'm just nowhere near what I should be doing. And this is where that idea really of planning comes in. And I know that sounds really kind of pathetic. Well, why are plans important? But they are. And I look at some of the things that we want to do, we have to create space for. And creating space sometimes means looking at a month agenda, looking at what happens on every day of a month. And within that, just putting within that month, 1 day, 2 days, whatever time, it is devoted to that thing we want to achieve. Because it is much easier to continue with something that we've started than it is to actually starting it. The start is always difficult. So I think whatever it is out there, and this is a sort of more practical me talking, having gone through all this Plutonic experience, the practical side of me is talking on this conclusion. And it really is about manifesting what you want to have happen. But in order to manifest it, making time for it. That's the first thing you do. You make time to think about it, plan it, make that first phone call, text, email, whatever it is, you do that thing. And you do it either as we go, this beautiful new moon in Capricorn, which is always the beginning of something new, but also you use these very intense, powerful influences to really rocket launch what you want to achieve, rather than just waiting and seeing what all these things mean and how they will affect you, and then thinking about, is that going to interfere with what I wanted to do, or what I hope would happen, or what I want to achieve this year. So it is a practical way of making sure that you get ahead with the things you want to do. And even if it's very stormy and the cosmos is stormy and life on the planet seems to be in chaos, we should never let go of our dreams and ambitions. We must always have a space for them. Okay? Well, thank you for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you next time on my next video. Bye for now.